Lieutenant Ryan Hale walked through the vast marble corridor of the Aetherian royal palace with a mix of awe and nervousness. It was his first visit to the Crown World, and even though he had trained for months for this diplomatic mission, nothing prepared him for the overwhelming sight before him. The palace shined with smooth silver arches, crystals glowing softly from the walls, and floors polished so perfectly that Ryan could see his reflection as he walked. He had been given simple instructions: wait in the greeting chamber until summoned. Unfortunately, the instructions never said how to get there, and the palace was a labyrinth of hallways that all looked the same. Ryan tried to stay calm, but deep down, he knew he was lost. This was not the first impression he wanted to make on a new alien empire. Earth had finally gained permission to meet the Aetherian Empire face to face, and this meeting was meant to begin a peaceful relationship between the two civilizations. Ryan had imagined shaking hands with dignitaries, exchanging traditional greetings, and doing everything by the official book. Instead, he was wandering alone with no translator active, hoping someone would pass by and rescue him. He brushed a hand through his hair and exhaled slowly. "Great job, Hale," he muttered to himself. "First mission off Earth, and you already got lost in the hallway." As he turned a corner, he stopped suddenly. Someone was walking toward him from the opposite end. Ryan's shoulders relaxed. The figure moved with elegant steps, long silver hair flowing like moonlight behind her. Her clothes shimmered with soft colors that shifted like water, and delicate crystals hung from her wrists and neckline. Ryan assumed she was a servant. With relief in his voice, and without thinking too hard, he greeted her casually. "Hey, sweetie. Sorry, I'm a bit lost. Could you help me out?" The woman froze in her tracks as if struck by a sudden blast of air. Her pale face flushed a bright violet, a color that surprised Ryan. He only realized then that maybe calling an alien woman sweetie was not the most diplomatic greeting. He opened his mouth to correct himself. But before he could speak, she gave a soft giggle that echoed lightly down the hallway. "Yes, dear?" she replied warmly. Ryan blinked. What?" The guards standing at the far end of the corridor reacted instantly. They stiffened, their hands on their elegant, crystalline weapons, their faces filled with shock, confusion, and possibly horror. Ryan looked back at the woman, and only then did everything snap into place. She was not a servant. She was dressed far too richly. Her presence was too commanding. This was royalty. This was Princess Alira of the Aetherian Empire. Ryan felt every bone in his body freeze. His brain raced through every diplomatic protocol he had read. Greeting royalty casually was not on the approved list. He had just met one of the most powerful individuals in the galaxy, with the equivalent of a friendly cafeteria hello. His heart dropped into his stomach. "I am so sorry," Ryan blurted out, stepping back. "I didn't realize. I thought you were, Alira raised a hand gently, stopping his panic. Her large violet eyes were filled not with anger, but amusement. Ryan noticed something subtle in her expression. She was enjoying this. "What is your name, human envoy?" she asked softly. "Lieutenant Ryan Hale, Earth Diplomacy Division," he answered quickly, standing straighter. His voice shook, but he managed to sound official again. Alira stepped closer, and Ryan could smell a faint scent of something like rain on warm stone. She looked him up and down with interest, as if trying to understand how someone without fear could speak to a princess so casually. "I see," she replied. "You are not like the other diplomats that have visited the Crown World." Ryan tried not to show his confusion, though it was heavy on his face. Her smile softened further. "On the contrary, I found your words refreshing." She paused and folded her hands. "When you spend your life surrounded by formality, titles, and endless rules, a simple greeting can feel pleasantly shocking." Ryan felt the tension in his shoulders ease just a little. "Still, you speak to me the way you would speak to anyone else," she answered. "That is rare here." Before he could respond, one of the guards hurried forward and bowed. "Your Highness, we should not remain here. The official reception waits." Alira waved him away gently. "They can wait a moment longer." She turned back to Ryan. "Perhaps you would allow me the honor of guiding you? I assume you are looking for the reception chamber." Ryan felt a wave of embarrassment wash over him. "Is it obvious I'm lost?" Alira giggled again, the sound light and genuine. Ryan found himself smiling despite his embarrassment. The princess motioned for him to walk beside her instead of behind, which startled the guards. Ryan noticed the small flickers of concern on their faces. They were not used to seeing royalty treated as equals, nor royalty accepting such treatment. As they walked, Alira spoke with honest curiosity. "How do humans address their leaders?" she asked. "Usually by name and title," Ryan replied. "But friends and partners sometimes use casual nicknames. It's not considered disrespectful among equals." Alira's eyes warmed. "That is not a word often spoken in these halls." Ryan could hear subtle exhaustion beneath her tone. He wondered how many years she had lived under ceremony and expectation. She walked him past high windows that showed a sky of shifting colors. Flying ships moved gently like crystal birds in formation. The palace was beautiful, but Ryan could imagine how lonely such beauty could feel if one had no freedom of speech or behavior. "I am curious," Alira continued. "Did you feel no fear addressing an alien princess in such a casual manner?" Ryan nearly laughed. "I didn't know you were a princess. Trust me, if I had known, I'd probably have bowed and messed that up too." Alira's eyes sparkled with delight. "I prefer what you gave me. A real greeting, not a performance." They reached a tall set of carved doors guarded by 2 armored soldiers. As they approached, the guards bowed deeply. The doors opened slowly, revealing a great chamber where Earth and Etherian officials waited anxiously. Every eye turned toward the princess and the human walking at her side. Alira leaned slightly toward Ryan and whispered, "I believe we have given them something to talk about." Ryan swallowed. "I didn't mean to start a political incident." She smiled confidently. "Not an incident. Something better. Something new." For a moment, Ryan forgot the weight of diplomacy and the eyes watching them. He realized that something unusual and important had started between humanity and the Etherian Empire, not through speeches or ceremonial words, but through a simple, unplanned greeting. A greeting that had made a princess giggle in a silver hallway. The chamber was full of officials seated at long crystal tables that reflected soft violet light from the high ceiling. Murmurs spread instantly as Princess Alira entered side by side with a human who did not look terrified, over-formal, or stiff. Ryan could feel dozens of eyes studying him with curiosity, confusion, and even suspicion. Every Etherion in the room wore elegant clothing and perfect posture, as if posing for a painting. Compared to them, Ryan felt like an ordinary man on the wrong stage. Yet Alira's calm presence beside him made him stand a little taller. When they stopped at the center of the chamber, the Emperor's advisor stood and announced the princess with a long, ceremonial introduction filled with flowery words and historical references. Ryan listened quietly, noticing how Alira's pleasant expression never changed, though he sensed she had heard such introductions too many times in her life. When the advisor finally finished, all attention shifted to Ryan. The humans at the far end of the room, including the Earth ambassador, stared at him wide-eyed, silently asking what on earth he had done to deserve an escort from the princess herself. Ryan was escorted to his seat, and the formal diplomatic talks began. Officials spoke in calm voices, discussing trade, culture, border cooperation, and science exchange. Everything was polite and structured. Ryan took notes carefully but stole occasional glances at Alira. She sat with her hands folded, listening but not fully engaged. Her eyes drifted toward Ryan more than once, and when she saw him looking back, she gave a tiny, amused smile before returning her gaze forward. When the first session ended, everyone stood to take a break. Refreshments were served by attendants who moved silently around the room. Before Ryan could step away, Alira walked toward him again. The Earth ambassador watched nervously as the princess stopped in front of Ryan with all the grace of royalty. "Lieutenant Hale," she said gently, "if you are available, I would like to continue our earlier conversation." Ryan blinked. "You want to talk to me? Here? Now?" Alira smiled. "Is that unusual for humans? Only when one of them is a princess." Ryan answered, honestly. Her eyes glittered with quiet laughter. She motioned for him to follow her toward a balcony at the side of the chamber. The guards automatically moved with them, but Alira lifted a hand, dismissing them to a respectful distance. Ryan found himself standing with the princess, overlooking the city outside. Towers of silver and crystal stood tall across the skyline, connected by floating bridges that glowed with soft light. Flying vehicles drifted through the air, like calm fish moving through water. For a moment, neither of them spoke, simply taking in the view. Alira closed her eyes briefly and breathed deeply, as if the open air gave her more freedom than the chamber behind them. "Does the palace overwhelm you?" she asked softly. Ryan nodded. "It's beautiful. But yes, I'm not used to such perfect luxury. Back home, things are simpler." Alira looked pleased. "I envy that." Ryan did not expect that answer. "You envy Earth?" She turned toward him, her silver hair catching the wind. "You saw how the officials sat. Every movement is controlled. Every word is measured. We are all expected to be flawless. It is difficult to breathe, under expectations that never end." Ryan could hear the sincerity in her voice. "I can't imagine living like that all the time." "It becomes normal," she said. "But normal does not always mean free." She paused. "In my entire life, I have been treated with respect from everyone. But respect and warmth are not the same thing. You were the first person to speak to me, as if I were simply another person." Ryan scratched the back of his neck, embarrassed. "Honestly, I was just trying not to panic while lost in the hallway." He expected her to laugh, but she did not. Instead, she studied him, as if trying to understand what it was like to be human. "You were genuine. That is rare here." He leaned on the balcony railing. "On Earth, leaders are treated with respect, yes, but they are still people. They laugh, joke, make mistakes. Some of our greatest leaders used simple language. They spoke to citizens as equals." Alira looked at the distant shining towers with quiet interest. "I wish I could speak to my people that way." Ryan could hear the weight behind her words. "What would happen if you tried?" She reddened slightly, but not from embarrassment this time, more like frustration. "They would stare in shock. The nobles would whisper. The court would assume I had lost reason or control. And my father's advisors would remind me that royal blood must remain distant to command respect." Ryan understood now. Her life, despite its beauty and power, was a cage of tradition. She could not relax, smile freely, or speak casually without causing waves. "You don't want to be distant," he said quietly. "No," she whispered. "I do not." Before either of them could say more, the Earth ambassador hurried toward them with nervous energy. "Lieutenant Hale," he whispered sharply, "what are you doing alone with the princess? Do you understand the situation you're creating?" Ryan turned to face him. "We're talking." "Yes. I can see that," the ambassador replied, his voice strained. "But her advisors are alarmed. She does not spend personal time with foreign diplomats." Alira spoke firmly before Ryan could respond. "He is a guest of the Crown World, and I am free to speak with him." The ambassador swallowed hard. "Of course, Your Highness. I only wish to ensure that there is no misunderstanding." Alira nodded politely, but her eyes shone with quiet irritation. Ryan realized this was not the first time someone had tried to control her decisions. When the ambassador left, Ryan sighed. "Sorry, I didn't mean to cause trouble for you." Alira turned to him with seriousness that caught him off guard. "You did not cause trouble. You showed something different. And difference is what our world needs." Ryan looked at her with interest. "Why me? I'm not the ambassador or the head diplomat. I'm just the guy who got lost." Alira faced him directly. "Because you speak honestly, without fear. You see me not as a title, but as a person. That is rare in any world." Ryan felt the truth in her words. He was not the most important man in the room, but he had something valuable: human authenticity, and Alira appreciated it more than any carefully crafted speech. They returned to the conference chamber when the break ended. But as the next session began, something had changed. Alira spoke with more spark in her tone, and a few officials looked startled when she made thoughtful suggestions about cultural exchange that involved open emotional experiences and direct contact between citizens of both civilizations. Some nobles shifted uncomfortably, but Ryan noticed a few younger officials looking inspired. He also noticed the whispers. People were talking about him and Alira. He had become a subject of interest, possibly even suspicion. Yet despite the pressure, Alira seemed lighter, almost relieved. As if speaking her mind, even a little, gave her strength. When the diplomatic session finally ended for the day, and everyone stood to leave, Alira glanced in Ryan's direction once more. Not a royal look, not a polite acknowledgement, just a simple look shared between two people who had begun to understand each other. Ryan realized something then. Their friendship, however new, had already changed the atmosphere in the royal court. Not through power or fame, but through something undeniably human. A real connection. And somewhere in the silence of the grand chamber, Ryan felt that this was only the beginning of a much larger story, one that neither Earth nor the Etherion Empire had expected. The next day of talks began with a very different atmosphere. News had already spread across the palace that Princess Alira had spent part of the diplomatic session speaking privately with a human envoy. Palace staff whispered in corners, guards exchanged glances, and nobles watched Ryan Hale with wide, curious eyes. Most had never seen the princess give personal attention to anyone who was not part of the noble class, let alone a visitor from another planet. Ryan could feel the attention pressing on him the moment he entered the conference hall. People were not simply observing him, they were studying him. At first, Ryan tried to ignore the stares. He found his seat and listened as the diplomats continued their structured discussions. The Earth delegation spoke calmly, presenting proposals for cultural exchange and shared scientific development. The Etherian officials responded politely, analyzing each suggestion with measured words. Everything seemed smooth on the surface, but Ryan sensed something beneath it. Tension. Some of the Etherian delegates were no longer speaking from a neutral standpoint. Their voices were cooler, their tone more guarded, as if the princess's interest in Ryan threatened the balance they were used to. Alira, however, remained composed. She sat with her hands folded gracefully, occasionally speaking in support of ideas that encouraged openness between Earth and the Empire. Every time she spoke, Ryan saw the surprise ripple through the nobles. This was not the silent princess listening from the background. This was someone who suddenly had opinions. And those opinions did not always match the traditional expectations of her people. Halfway through the morning session, one of the senior Aetherion advisors finally addressed the matter directly. He stood, his voice respectful but sharp. "Your Highness, forgive me, but it seems that the human envoy has had great influence on your outlook within a short time." The room fell silent. Every eye turned to Alira. Ryan's pulse immediately sped up. He had not wanted to draw attention or interfere with her political standing. Alira's expression did not change. She answered calmly, "I have simply been reminded that diplomacy is not only about rules. It is also about understanding. The advisor frowned slightly. Understanding, yes. But influence from outsiders must be taken carefully. This envoy does not understand our traditions. Alira looked at Ryan for a brief moment before replying, "Perhaps that is why his viewpoint is valuable." The advisor's mouth tightened. For nobles raised in a world where tradition governed every word and gesture, the princess's openness was almost shocking. Ryan could see anger building quietly in some faces. The ambassador from Earth shifted nervously, clearly wishing this line of conversation would end. The session continued, but the atmosphere had changed. The nobles whispered among themselves more openly. Some stared at Ryan with distrust, others with curiosity, and a few with thinly veiled annoyance. Ryan kept his composure, but inside he wondered if his honest conversation with the princess had placed her in political danger. When the session paused for lunch, the court filtered out of the hall. Some nobles walked together, whispering with fast, controlled voices. Others shot Ryan small glances before looking away. Ryan began to walk toward the refreshment tables, hoping for a moment to breathe. He had barely taken 2 steps when someone called out to him, "Lieutenant Hale." Ryan turned. An older man in ceremonial robes stood in the doorway. His hair was silver, and his face stern. His eyes were sharp, but calm. He introduced himself. "I am Chancellor Velen, Chief Advisor to the Emperor." Ryan stood straighter. "It is an honor, Chancellor." The Chancellor nodded once. "Walk with me." Ryan followed him into a side hallway. The palace guards kept their distance, but their presence was heavy. Velen did not speak at first. He walked slowly, hands behind his back. When they finally reached a quiet alcove, he turned to Ryan with a thoughtful expression. "You are not the first human diplomat to visit our world, but you are the first to attract the attention of the princess." Ryan swallowed. "I did not intend." Velen raised a hand slightly to silence him. "Intent does not always matter. Results do." Ryan waited, unsure what to say. Velen studied him carefully, as if measuring the truth of his character. "Alira is beloved by our people," Velen said, "but she is also the future ruler. Her every step must be careful. If she opens herself to outsiders too quickly, the nobles may fear change. And fear leads to resistance." Ryan nodded slowly. "I understand. I never meant to cause—" Velen cut in again. "You speak to her like you speak to anyone. That is unusual here." Ryan exhaled. "I know. She said she liked that." A small smile tugged at Velen's stern features. "I am not surprised. She has lived inside walls of respect but very little warmth." Ryan shifted uncomfortably. "What do you want me to do?" Velen looked him in the eye. "Be careful. The court watches. And not everyone here wishes for things to change." Ryan heard the warning clearly. This was not a threat. This was advice from someone who had seen politics from the inside his entire life. Ryan nodded, respectfully. "I will be mindful." Velen gave a small nod and walked away, leaving Ryan alone with his thoughts. Ryan leaned against the cool crystal wall and sighed. He had not planned any of this. He had simply greeted someone honestly, and now the future of diplomacy might be shifting around him. When Ryan returned to the lunch hall, he noticed that a small group of nobles had gathered around Princess Alira. Their voices were polite but sharp, filled with forced smiles and pointed questions. Ryan could not hear exactly what they were saying, but he could see the signs. Subtle pressure, gentle demands, maybe even veiled warnings. Alira's posture was poised, but there was tension in her shoulders. When she noticed Ryan across the room, something in her expression softened for a moment. Then, without hesitation, she stepped away from the nobles and walked toward him. "You look troubled," she said quietly. Ryan smiled slightly. "I just had a meeting with Chancellor Velen." Alira's eyebrow lifted. "He did," Ryan admitted. "He said, Not everyone wants change. Alira's voice lowered. That has always been true. They stood near the large windows where the pale city horizon stretched out in glowing lines. For a moment, they were silent. Then Ryan spoke again. Maybe I should keep some distance. I don't want to make things harder for you. Alira shook her head immediately. If you withdraw because of fear, then you would be no different from the nobles who worry about appearance more than truth. Ryan looked at her, surprised. But you're the one. They're pressuring. Alira stepped closer. Her voice was soft but strong. If I cannot speak to someone freely, then what kind of leader will I become? Ryan did not have an answer. She held his gaze for a moment, then looked away toward the palace chamber, where discussions would soon begin again. A quiet determination had settled into her eyes. She was done being silent. The afternoon session began with increased tension. The nobles spoke more sharply, questioning suggestions that involved cultural mixing. One delegate finally said what many were thinking. Princess, we understand your new enthusiasm, but perhaps alien influence has come too quickly. Alira stood, surprising everyone. Her posture was regal, her voice unwavering. My opinions are my own. And listening does not weaken us. It is fear that weakens us. The hall fell into heavy silence. The nobles stared, some shocked, others impressed. Ryan felt a chill run through him. This was a turning point. Alira sat down again, calm and composed. But Ryan sensed the shift. The court was now fully aware that the princess was thinking for herself. And whether they liked it or not, her inspiration had come from the honest conversation of a single human. By the time the day's talks ended, the palace air felt heavier. Some nobles left with stiff expressions. Ryan saw too, whispering to guards, with sharp gestures. Something was being planned. He did not know what, but he felt the warning from Velen echo in his mind. Not everyone wanted change. As Ryan left the chamber, he had the uneasy feeling that things were about to escalate. The relationship forming between Earth and the Aetherian Empire was no longer just diplomacy, it was now a spark capable of lighting fires across the ancient halls of power. And the court was beginning to choose sides. Princess Alira stood inside the grand chamber beside Lieutenant Ryan Hale, both of them facing the complicated situation that had unfolded like a sudden storm. Delegations from different planets, diplomats of many species, and leaders in ceremonial robes stared in confusion after the unexpected exchange between the princess and the human envoy. Whispers filled the chamber like a soft buzzing wave, and the atmosphere grew tense and uncertain. Ryan could feel hundreds of eyes on his back, and for a moment, he wondered if this was how historical mistakes started. The first ambassador to speak was from the Keltis Dominion, an insect-like species with shimmering green plates covering their bodies. Their voice clicked sharply through a translator. Princess Alira, is this human permitted to speak to the throne with such casual disrespect? The accusation hung in the chamber. Ryan could feel his heart beating hard, but before he could speak in his defense, Alira stepped forward. Her posture was elegant, and her eyes held a calm authority that silenced the room. I granted him permission, she said clearly. He is a guest, and he has shown honesty and sincerity. That is something I do not receive often. Shock rolled through the chamber. Ryan tried not to look too surprised, but even he had not expected such strong defense. Several alien representatives whispered among themselves, unsure how to react to the princess publicly supporting a human. The next voice came from the Aetherian High Chancellor, a tall figure dressed in majestic violet robes. His face was lined with age and wisdom, and he looked at Ryan with careful calculation. Your Highness, the dignitaries of this chamber must understand why a new envoy is treated with such unique favor. Alira did not hesitate. Because he did not see a princess first. He saw a person. The chamber became still. Many of the delegates exchanged uncomfortable glances. In Aetherian politics, titles and traditions ruled everything. To speak so directly was nearly revolutionary. Ryan realized this was not just about him. Alira had been waiting for a moment like this, perhaps for years. Ryan spoke quietly so only she could hear. "Are you sure about this? I don't want to cause trouble you don't need." She gave him a small smile in return. Sometimes, trouble is needed to open a closed door. The High Chancellor considered Alira's words carefully before responding. "Very well. But the matter at hand remains. Earth seeks diplomatic rights within the Crown world. The Council must vote." One by one, the Council members raised their glowing badges. Most were still uncertain, some suspicious, but Alira's influence carried weight. A neutral voice in the chamber announced slowly, "The vote is approved. Earth will be granted diplomatic entry." Ryan felt a wave of relief wash over him. Months of training, endless preparation, and the heavy responsibility of representing Earth had finally paid off. And yet, he knew none of this would have succeeded without the princess. When the meeting ended, Alira personally escorted Ryan out of the chamber. The guards followed, maintaining distance, but keeping watch. The hallway they walked through had wide windows showing the glowing sky, ships drifting by like birds with crystal wings. Ryan finally allowed himself to breathe normally. "You didn't have to defend me in front of everyone," he said softly. "I did," she replied. "If I did not, I would only prove that I am a prisoner of protocol." Ryan looked at her, noticing the faint tiredness in her eyes. "You're not free here, are you?" She stopped walking. For the first time since their meeting, she looked not like a confident princess, but like someone who had quietly carried too much for too long. Etherian royalty is respected. But we are also owned by our duties. Everything we say is controlled. Everything we feel must be hidden. Even laughter is rare. Ryan understood now why she reacted the way she did when he spoke casually. It was not the greeting that touched her. It was the normality of it. The reminder of a life she did not have. A human life. He placed a hand on his chest respectfully. "If Earth can do anything to help." She shook her head lightly, though her expression remained grateful. "This is my burden. You have already done more than you know." Ryan wanted to argue, but he realized she was right. Her world was complex, polished, beautiful, but quietly suffocating. He had not come here to challenge their society. His mission was simply diplomacy. Yet fate had decided to drop him into something far larger. Before they reached the next chamber, the High Chancellor approached them with two assistants. His expression was formal, but not hostile. "Lieutenant Hale, a press conference will be held soon in the Central Hall. News delegates from across the Empire will ask questions. You must answer carefully." One. Ryan nodded. "I understand." The Chancellor turned to Alira. "Your Highness, I must ask that you refrain from further informal contact. Certain voices in the Council are concerned." Alira smiled in a way that was polite but not submissive. "I will consider their concerns." Alira smiled. "I will consider their concerns." Alira smiled in a way that was polite. The Chancellor inclined his head and left. Ryan whispered under his breath, "I think he means they're scared of change." Alira's soft giggle returned. Diplomatically spoken. They continued walking until they reached the waiting area for the upcoming press session. Assistants prepared microphones, holographic recorders, and displays. Ryan had been trained for media back home, but alien press was completely new to him. He took a deep breath and straightened his uniform. Alira leaned slightly closer and spoke quietly. "You will be fine. Just speak with the same honesty you spoke to me. That's what got me into this mess," he answered with a small grin. "And it is what won the Council's vote," she replied. The doors to the press hall opened. A wave of bright lights, flashing cameras, and curious faces turned toward Ryan, waiting for him to speak. He felt the weight of Earth, the galaxy, and expectations pressing down on him. But then, he remembered the princess's calm confidence. He stepped forward. Questions fired rapidly, one after another. Human envoy. Why did you speak to our princess in such a casual tone? Does Earth not respect royal customs? Was this a planned diplomatic insult? Ryan lifted a hand, and the hall quieted. His voice was firm, but steady. I addressed Princess Alira the way I would address any person I met in a hallway. On Earth, respect is shown through sincerity, not only through titles. I meant no insult, and I stand by that. Many reporters scribbled notes. Some looked impressed, others doubtful. But Ryan continued. Earth seeks friendship, cooperation, and equal respect. Not dominance, not disrespect, and not fear. The hall buzzed. The reporters were not just hearing words. They were seeing something new. A human who dared speak openly in a world defined by formal restraint. In the back of the room, Princess Alira watched with quiet pride. She could see that Ryan was not just a diplomat. He was a reminder of something precious. A world where people spoke freely, treated each other as equals, and believed change was possible. As the press conference continued, Ryan answered every question with calm honesty. And while he spoke, Alira realized something unexpected. Earth had not just brought a diplomat. Earth had brought an idea. An idea that could slowly, quietly, open doors that had been closed for centuries. And she was ready to see where that idea would lead. Ryan's speech had changed something in the room, and Princess Alira saw it clearly. Delegates who once looked suspicious now looked thoughtful. Some reporters exchanged curious glances. The idea of a world where people spoke freely without bowing to titles was new to many of them. Alira wondered how long it would take before such a thought spread beyond this hall and into the entire palace. When the press conference ended, Ryan stepped away from the platform with a quiet exhale. The tension in his shoulders melted, and he wiped a small bead of sweat from his forehead. He had made it through without insulting anyone, causing a diplomatic scene, or fainting on stage. For a first mission, he decided that was a win. Alira approached him with a soft smile. He chuckled lightly. Are you sure? Half the reporters looked like they wanted to arrest me. She shook her head gently. No. They were simply shocked. You spoke truth. That is powerful in itself. Before Ryan could reply, the High Chancellor approached again. His expression was unreadable, but his posture was rigid. Lieutenant Hale, your presence has stirred significant reaction. Some members of the Council believe your influence on Her Highness may be disruptive. I contented it. Ryan tensed. I didn't mean to disrupt anything. The Chancellor did not raise his voice, but his tone remained strict. Change is not always welcome in an empire as old as ours. Alira stepped forward. Chancellor, Lieutenant Hale only showed honesty. That is something our politics could benefit from. The Chancellor looked at her with a hint of regret. Perhaps. But for now, it would be wise to keep a respectful distance. Rumors have already begun. Dong. Dong. Ryan swallowed a sigh. If I caused trouble for you. Alira lifted her head. He caused no trouble. He only reminded people that we are living beings, not statues. The Chancellor gave a formal bow and left. But Ryan could feel the weight of his warning. Alira, however, seemed calm. She motioned for Ryan to follow her down another corridor. 2 guards followed them at a distance, though they did not interfere. They walked past tall windows that showed the golden horizon. Evening light touched the palace walls, making crystals sparkle, like stars frozen in motion. Ryan finally spoke. I don't want to damage your standing here. You won't, she answered. Those who oppose change were looking for reasons long before you arrived. But I don't want to make things harder for you. She looked at him, her expression soft, yet firm. My path was hard, long before today. Her words reminded Ryan again how trapped she was. Born into royalty, given everything except freedom. Her life was perfect, and yet not hers to control. They continued walking until they entered a balcony overlooking the capital. The city stretched far in every direction, filled with glowing towers, sky bridges, and floating ships. Alira leaned lightly on the railing, the wind brushing her silver hair. "Beautiful view," Ryan said quietly. "Yes," she replied. "I have seen it thousands of times. Yet this evening, it feels different." Ryan glanced at her. "How so?" "Because I am not standing here alone." He wanted to say something comforting, but the words stuck in his throat. Sometimes silence was more honest than speech. Far below, the city hummed with life. From this height, everything looked peaceful. But Ryan sensed the pressure beneath the surface, a world ruled by flawless order, held together by old traditions and fear of change. Alira spoke again, her voice soft but sincere. "When I was younger, I dreamed of seeing other worlds. I imagined walking in places where no one knew I was royalty, where I could talk to strangers without guards listening, where I could laugh freely." She paused. "But I was born here. My duty is here." Ryan leaned beside her. "Maybe duty and freedom don't have to fight each other forever." She looked at him with quiet surprise. "Do humans truly believe that?" He smiled. "Most of us try to." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence was peaceful, not uncomfortable. Suddenly, the door behind them opened, and one of the palace aides hurried out. He bowed quickly. "Your Highness, the council requests your presence immediately. There are new concerns after the press session." Alira straightened. "I understand. Tell them I will arrive shortly." The aide bowed again and rushed away. Ryan sighed. "That sounds serious." "It always does," she replied softly. She began walking back inside, and Ryan followed. As they moved through the corridor, she glanced at him and spoke quietly, so only he could hear. "No matter what the council decides, remember this. I do not regret how we met." Ryan gave a small grin. "Even the, hey, sweetie part?" Alira's cheeks flushed a faint violet again. "Especially that part." Ryan laughed softly. It was a genuine moment in a place that rarely allowed such things. They reached the Grand Council door. The guards opened it, revealing a large circular chamber filled with high-ranking officials. Their expressions were stern. Some appeared troubled. Others simply looked afraid of change, afraid of ideas, afraid of losing control. Alira turned to Ryan. "This meeting is for royalty and council only. You must wait outside." Ryan nodded. "Good luck." She held his gaze for a moment, then turned and stepped into the chamber. The doors slowly closed, leaving Ryan alone in the hallway. He stood there with a heavy feeling in his chest. He wanted to help her, but there was nothing he could do. This was her world, her battle. Minutes passed. Then more. The silence in the hallway seemed to stretch endlessly. Guards stood watch, unmoving as statues. Ryan shifted his weight, restless. He wished he could at least listen. But protocol was protocol. Finally, the doors opened. Alira stepped out, looking calm but thoughtful. Ryan tried to read her expression. "How did it go?" She took a small breath. "Better than expected, worse than hoped." He tilted his head. "Meaning?" "The council is divided. Some believe your presence will encourage open dialogue between our worlds. Others fear humans may influence our culture too quickly." Ryan nodded slowly. "So, what now?" "No. We move forward slowly and carefully." She looked up at him. "The council agreed to begin small diplomatic exchanges. Human representatives will be invited to participate in joint learning programs. It is not much, but it is a beginning." Ryan smiled. I'll take beginnings. That's how big things start. She returned the smile. A quiet moment settled between them. The palace lights glowed softly, and the endless sky beyond the windows shimmered with golden reflections. Earth and Etherian were no longer strangers. Two worlds, two cultures, had begun to speak. Not with fear or formality, but with sincerity. And it all began with one lost human in a hallway saying, "Hey, sweetie." Alira looked toward the city outside, then back to Ryan. "I look forward to the next time we meet." Ryan grinned. "Same. I'll try not to get lost next time." "You may get lost if you wish," she replied gently. "I will always find you." Those words stayed with Ryan long after he left the palace. Because he knew this was not the end. It was the first chapter of something far larger. An alliance, a friendship, and a new idea beginning to grow inside an old empire. A simple human belief that respect could come from sincerity, not titles. That freedom and duty could walk side by side. And Princess Alira was ready to see how far that idea could go.